Good afternoon, welcome. We are just waiting for the attendee list to kind of stabilize. A lot of students are coming in, which is great to see. So just give us about a minute and we'll hope to get everybody into the webinar.
Can you hear me okay, Beth?
Yep, it sounds good.
Okay, thanks. So the schedule you send out in the email, is that the way it's going to go?
I think we'll get started. We have Dean Linseth here to welcome everyone. Dean Linseth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bierke, and good afternoon, all the students. This is a great day at UND Aerospace to finally get going with flight training. So we want to give you some updates about flight operations and answer your questions. We'll be having various folks go through their particular parts of the program, and we're going to start that off with Jeremy Ressler on how we're going to do this phased approach to flight training.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The important thing for everybody to understand is that we can't just open the doors and just invite everybody in. It's got to be a controlled effort and make sure that we're doing things properly. So one thing to explain, so when you look at this picture that's on the screen right now, that is actually flight operations a few days ago. So as a cost savings measure, the airport shut down the east side of the airfield, 2 runways and all the taxiways. Those X's have been removed. They are prepping the grounds, they're mowing grass, they're painting the runways and everything right now. So they are getting ready for us. We're ready to be open next week. But the phased approach, it starts off, we are getting everything ready for the students that are on the class rosters for the summer. So those students all should have gotten an email yesterday with some additional guidance. And then we're also bringing back our flight instructors step by step. They're going to have their own currency and proficiency training to go through before they're back on the line working with students themselves. Once we go through that process, we're still learning about what works with our new procedures, what needs to be adjusted. And we're going to continue to assess how we're doing and continue to add more and more students into the back into flight ops. Next students to be invited back would be graduating seniors, upperclassmen, and then all of the students, the remaining students, we plan to get a survey out to really gauge your overall intention of this summer. And that information is going to have play a big role in our decision making. But the important thing to realize is that we can't have 800 students show up next week. It just can't be done. And so we have to do a little bit in June, and then we move into July, and so on and so forth. So step by step, we'll get through that. Let's see, that's right, next thing, very common question, students and CFIs are asking themselves, can they work with their CFI that they're originally assigned to? That's the goal. We're going to try to keep existing CFI and student pairings together as much as possible. It's not going to be 100%. It's just the pieces to this jigsaw puzzle are not going to allow for every single CFI and student pairing to work together. But ideally, I want to see CFIs with 3, 4, maximum 5 students each, just so that flight instructor is able to work with that student every single day. So some students will have to be reassigned just to manage the overall workload. So I think that should be it for my side of things.
Perfect. Well, I'll take over. So again, part of this process over the last 8 weeks is obviously for us to return to flight training. Our ultimate goal was to do it, which allows our students, our instructors, staff, you name it, from line to maintenance, to be safe and feel safe. So that's where a lot of the processes and the procedures that you're going to see that we've kind of developed, that you'll see when you return to the flight line, whether it's in a week, whether it's in 2 weeks, or whether it's maybe even in July. These procedures are going to be in place. And a lot of times we're going to have to ask for your flexibility as you move forward. So with that, I'll have Beth, you want to, I don't know, can I adjust slides or? Perfect. The first thing is that flight training is going to be different. How you left UND in March is not going to be the same way that you return back to Grand Forks. And even those that are coming back for the summer and that return, let's say between now and June 8th, our processes, our procedures are going to be changing daily and weekly. And so again, the ultimate goal of the organization is communicating that out to you, the student, and then also our flight instructors. So with that, flexibility is one of the keys to this whole process moving forward and keeping everybody safe. And I like to stress that any mitigation that we put in place, it's not always going to guarantee 100% safety. Just like, again, these processes in place that we have, our ultimate goal is to lower the risk of COVID at the airport to its lowest practical level. Will it be zero? Probably not. But again, it's something that we're going to strive to do to make that happen. It's going to take everybody. And again, I relate it to stuff that we talk about back in December 2019, you name it. We've talked about loss control, near miss, MEGs on. Those are all examples of ways we try to mitigate risk. COVID's just added to that list. And what we have to be cautious of is not put too much of that pressure or too much of the emphasis on COVID. We still have to remember that we have a responsibility in that aircraft outside of just COVID mitigations. So, and lastly, before I jump into kind of what we're doing, is a lot of what we see with COVID is what you do personally. And so that's what makes this so different than a lot of other things that we've faced in the past, is that your actions when you leave the airport, your actions on the weekends, where you go, and what you do will have a direct effect on if UND continues to operate throughout the summer. And so I've stressed that to our flight instructor group we met with this morning. I stress that with our staff and faculty that we just met with. And again, you're also part of that process, is that it takes everybody. So what we're doing out at the airport, some of the differences that you're going to see, the biggest thing is the first thing walking through dispatch is, as a flight training student, you will be required to complete a screening form. That screening form asks some questions such as, have you been internationally in the last 14 days? Have you traveled outside the state of North Dakota in the past 14 days? Do you have symptoms, the common symptoms of COVID? And then do you have a temperature? And lastly, are you considered a close contact? So do you know somebody, not know somebody, sorry, have you been in contact with somebody who's currently undergoing COVID investigation or has been tested positive? If you answer yes to those, we ask that you not come to flight operations until you're able to clear yourself from a COVID standpoint, and that you are negative. So, and the ultimate goal there is, again, we're trying to limit the contact at UND Aerospace. We have had several questions on the North Dakota in the past 14 days. And again, that's just one of the processes that we have in place. Do we hope to see it change as the summer progresses on and towards fall? We do. But right now, that is one of our requirements, is that if you leave the state of North Dakota and you were to come back, you're basically, you can't fly for 14 days. You can't be in a cockpit. Example I use is, I was planning on heading to Maple Lake with the family on Saturday. I can't do that anymore. If I do it, I'm not flying for 14 days. So there are sacrifices that we all have to take a look at if we plan to get back into that aircraft and make it safe. So that's kind of the first step of mitigation. The second, when you walk into dispatch, you're going to notice all the furniture's gone. We've moved furniture to the center hangar, and part of that is the social distancing aspect. So we have the screening process to protect us on the front end, and then it's going to be social distancing and what we do moving forward. Back in March, if it was a nice day, you'd see 20, 30, 40 people gathered in dispatch. That will not happen again. There's X's on the floor. If you're not on one of those X's, you're moving. And if you're going to be somewhere, you're going to head to the center hangar where we have tables that are spaced out for CDC guidelines. So again, our facilities are quite large, so there should be plenty of areas for CFIs and students to go to pre-brief, but the ultimate goal is avoiding those clusters of people. From a disinfecting standpoint and cleaning, we have cleaning supplies throughout the airport. So it's not like you're gonna have to search for them. We have them in dispatch. We have them by the flight instructor's office up in Crookston, over above dispatch, that main center hangar. There's supplies there. So again, we're not short of supplies right now. But again, you will see those throughout the facility and then also our aircraft. So that's basically that third step of cleaning, is that each crew is required to disinfect their aircraft prior to use. And you might ask, why prior and not have the previous crew do it? Well, from a safety standpoint, I think I would want to be responsible for making sure my airplane is disinfected, not necessarily relying on the person before me. So again, when you get to that airplane, one of our goals is to disinfect as a flight crew. So when the aircraft comes out in the morning, they will be disinfected for you. The same thing with the helicopters and with the UAS. We have procedures for all three of those as we move forward. Last thing, I'll jump back to social distancing. We are requiring that you have a mask anytime that you're in a public space out of flight operations and Ryan Hall. And what is a public space? Dispatch lobby, hallways, records, you name it. That's all considered public. A cloth mask is okay in those areas. However, in an aircraft, you must wear a surgical mask, a surgical face mask. So we've gone through those procedures as well. And but yeah, so that's kind of a brief overview of some of the differences and changes you'll see. And like I said, my expectation is these will continue to morph and they will continue to change as we vet this process moving forward. So like I said, I will definitely take questions at the end. But from there, I think up next is Wes with the Hilo side.
And before Wes jumps in, I'm just going to mention, we can see that you guys have definitely found the Q&A function, which is great. We know you have a lot of questions. We will be getting to the questions at the end. We have quite a few panelists ready to present for you. We don't anticipate having enough time to simply answer all of these questions, but we are recording them. And we'll be looking forward to updating our aerospace blog with some new FAQs based on these questions. But again, we have a number of panelists, so please wait for them to present. And then also we have enabled the upvote feature. So I believe if you press on the thumbs up, we'll know which questions more of you really want answered that we'll attempt to answer here during the live feature. So I just wanted to get that in there. Thank you, Brian. And Wes. All
right. Thank you, Beth. Just wanted to provide an update here for helicopter students that are tuning in. Helicopters, since we are a little bit smaller departments, we hope to be up to near full capacity towards the end of June. But we're going to start with a number of priority students who really are close to their stage check or check ride, or were close to their stage check and check ride prior to the shutdown. So those students who are identified as priority students should have been contacted directly by their flight instructor to set up basically a time where you can start meeting as early as next week. Like Jeremy said, we're going to be going through instructor standardization for all those instructors coming back. So I wouldn't expect to be flying right away next Tuesday. It's going to take some time. We also have a number of instructors who are out of town, and that's what we're coordinating now to make sure that when our instructors get back, if they're out of state, that they have that necessary 14-day period before they resume any training with students. If you haven't been identified as a priority student, you'll still be able to begin flying as early as June 8th if you're in Grand Forks. Really, our biggest limiting factor right now is just the flight instructors. So once we have our flight instructors back to near full capacity, we'll be able to begin flying at a fairly regular basis. Students, just a reminder, if you are out of state right now, you will have to do that 14-day quarantine period when you do return. So make sure you are planning for that if you've been contacted by your flight instructor and you're looking to get started either over the next 2 weeks or after June 8th. Of course, we have heard from a number of students who will not be back until either later in the summer or even in the fall. That's totally okay. If your instructor contacts you, just want to reinforce that you're not required to come back by any means. At this point, it's just we want to extend that invitation to you if it's something that you're interested in doing. If your flight instructor hasn't contacted you, go ahead and start reaching out to them to let them know your plans. If you don't have a flight instructor assignment, I know we have a number of new students starting this summer as well. Please contact me directly. My information is available online, and also, all students and instructors should have it as well. So, but please reach out to your flight instructor if you have one assigned right now. And then we're excited to get you started here over the next few weeks. And with that, I'll be around for Q&A, and I'll hand it off to Paul Schneider for a UAS update.
Hello, everyone. For UAS operations, Beth, you go to the next slide. Really, we're trying to make sure that we are doing the same procedures that are being used by the airplanes and helicopters as well. So there's not a lot of differences there. A couple things, some of you, we normally dispatch or self-dispatch ourselves. And so to do things a little bit different, so we make sure that we have the mask, make sure that we have our gloves, things that we need to have to fly. The UAS students will be going through Ryan Hall. So you'll just go into Ryan Hall, and each day you'll start out there. And after you've gotten your temp check and verified your status and gotten your mask and received a sticker showing that you went through that process, you'll be getting connected with your instructor and working individually with your instructor, because you may be going out to different locations to fly your UAS. So a little bit different process, but everybody's going to start through Ryan Hall. Your instructors, James Moe and Dan Miles, have already been calling folks, so you should be receiving a phone call from a flight instructor to talk to you about coming back for flight training and looking at your schedules. Some of the things that we're going to use in order to determine priority is, of course, with finish up students, that will be inviting you back and giving you dates that you can return in a short period of time, hopefully, to finish your flight training. And things we're looking at, of course, is when you started the course, and if you're already in the area, to deal with those 14-day requirements that have already been talked about. Also, if you have questions in regards to prerequisites or U.S. policy that we have in place, please feel free to reach out to me. I've put my email here, so paul.snyder@und.edu. So I'll be checking that regularly. And so if you have any questions as you're trying to figure this out, or if you haven't heard from our UAS instructors yet, let me know that. So we'll make sure that we get a hold of you right away so we can start communicating with you. And with that, let's go ahead. I'll hand it over to Lewis Archer, who's Assistant Chair of Flight Academics.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick update here. So again, our summer flight courses are going to begin on June 8th. That's AVIT 102, 222, 323, 325, 414, and 415. The exception is AVIT 221, which will begin on June 29th. Our authorizations for those courses for Campus Connection registration, those have all been distributed, with the exception of a few left in 102, and then 415, if you're on a wait list for 415 in the summer. I'll be reaching out to each of you individually to try to accommodate as many as we can in that course, with the recognition that you're quickly approaching graduation. If you have not received authorization to register for the course in Campus Connection for a summer flight course, and you're not signed up for 102 or 415, then unfortunately you're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to accommodate you for a new flight course this summer. As far as our fall flight courses, the prerequisite has been relaxed for registration, so we will allow Campus Connection registration for a fall flight course as long as you have 12 completed lessons in the previous flight course and you have a status of added in Ames. If you are on a wait list in Ames for a fall flight course, we're going to continue to evaluate where we can make adjustments so that we can accommodate as many students as possible. But for the time being, you'll have to stay on the wait list until we can get all that figured out. This relaxation of the prerequisites, this is, at this time, we're planning this for the fall. and we expect that we're going to hold to our standard prerequisites in the spring. So that requires some preparation and planning for all of our students to understand that there may need to be a semester here where you take that semester to catch up on your flight training rather than begin a new flight course. So just be aware of that. Keep that in mind, that we currently expect to hold prerequisites in the spring semester. 480 is a little bit different than the other flight courses. So we are planning to hold prerequisites for 480 this fall. So at this time, you still have to be complete with 415 to register for AVIT 480 in the fall. If there are any other additional questions that aren't covered during this webinar, you're always welcome to send questions to the email address listed there. That's flightcourse@aero.und.edu. And with that, I'll hand it over to Megan with UND Housing.
Thank you. We just want to make sure that students are aware that we do have summer housing options available for those that need it. To sign up for housing, you'll have to complete your application in your housing self-service, and there is a $60 application fee associated with that. Just as a note that all summer housing will be held in University Place at this time. All students will have a private bedroom. That double room rate would still apply though. And so the rates are on our website. Rates will be prorated based on the student's length of stay. So you guys can tell us the specific date that you're wanting to come back to campus. However, please note that summer agreements for those students that aren't continuing to live on campus in the fall will end on August 9th. And so you can indicate those exact dates, and the approximate weekly rate for that is $150. One thing to also note at this time is that dining services is closed and that we're not currently offering summer meal plans. So there's no summer meal plans being offered at this time. I'll throw it to Dr. Bierke now for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all of the panelists. A lot of great information. Just a few other additional updates before we do open it up and start answering all of your great questions out there. Student Health Services, we were just notified today that they do plan to reopen for aviation medical starting on June 2nd. With that, they also noted that they already have 60 individuals, 60 pilots waiting for an appointment. So they are working through those 60 first. But if you need an aviation medical, you can call them to schedule that up. They are resuming again June 2nd. And then also aviation flight account information. As you're well aware, UND for the most part is still working remotely, which means all of our financial aid and fiscal affairs individuals are working remotely. So you're not going to be able to stop by Odegaard Hall, because in fact Odegaard Hall is closed as well for the summer. But you can still reach out. You can call them at the number provided, and this is all on our website as well, or email them to talk if you do have flight account questions. They're still working full time. They just are working remotely, as well as I'm sure many of you know Elaine in financial aid, who deals with a lot of our aviation students. She is available as well, and currently in the process of working through the summer flight course approvals for financial aid. So everyone is still available. It's just going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to rely on phone calls and emails to get a hold of most of us working remotely. Flight operations is kind of the exception right now on campus, as being the real only place open to students. So with that, we will open it up for questions and answers. Again, there should be a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you open that up, you should be seeing all of the other great questions that have been asked. You do have the ability to upvote. That puts it on the top of our queuing list, or write in your own questions. I just do want to say we only have about 30 minutes left. We know we're not going to be able to answer all of your questions, but we are capturing them all, and we are going to sift through those over the weekend, and hopefully early next week add an update to our FAQs on the blog, as well as I'm sure Professor Van Huysen will email those out to the aviation students as well. So even if we don't get to your question today, guaranteed we are capturing these, and we hope to update that list soon. So Brett, why don't you kick off the Q&A?
Great, and yes, that's correct. We will send that information out. So for our first and very popular question here, we will give this to Jeremy. The question is, for clarification, why is priority given to students signed up for a summer session? Will those students be able to finish their current course and then continuously move on to their next course?
Yes, so and this whole issue we knew was going to be a sticking point with the students. Everyone, it's great to see the motivation, number one, that students want to be back at flight ops and back on the flight schedule, so that's great. But to put things in perspective, in January, we had 1,400 students on the flight schedule. We cannot have 1,400 students on the flight schedule next week. It cannot happen. Part of our COVID mitigation procedures is to limit numbers. It's not business as usual at the first part of this summer. Students, so how do you limit that? And how do you come up with a system that's showing fairness and some sort of process and to make this determination? That's where the summer courses come into play. The students that are registered for the summer courses met prior requirements to be in those courses. And they have a course and a half to do this summer versus the other students, the finish up students from spring and fall, have less than a course to complete. So our goal is to bring in the summer students first, get that rolling, get our employees back, and then moving forward as we get into June, then we're going to start bringing in more students. And like I said before, it was the students that are going to be graduating. Then we're focusing more on the upperclassmen, and then we'll start bringing in other students. And really what it boils down to is, what do we have room for moving forward this summer? It's, we don't want to do flight training at a rate of 2 or 3 days a week. We ideally want the flight training to be 6 days a week. Get the student done and get them back home. We can't do, for COVID mitigation, we need to try to limit the number of students here at flight operations. So the goal is, let's have a few hundred students here at a time, not 1,400. So let's get some students done, bring in more, get some students done, bring in more. That's the goal this summer.
Thanks, Jeremy. Another popular question, which is also something that we've been talking about at length the last 2 months, asks, will masks be provided for flight students? Brian.
Fantastic. Okay. When it comes to masks, I saw there were several questions on the Q&A, so I'll try to answer a bunch of them. But first, masks will be provided. We do have about 2,500 surgical masks. Now, those are not N95 masks. Those are two separate type of masks. Basically, the surgical mask that we're referring to, it's a 3-ply filter type mask or paper mask that we have vetted with an infectious disease specialist down at NDSU to help with the procedures. So it is not the same N95 that you will see in the medical field. We will provide those. Now, with the providing them, we don't have and we won't have enough for everybody to go through one mask a day. And so we are asking that your mask should last you 7 days. And so there is a training video when you come back to the flight line that you'll get to watch. It's about 9 minutes long, but it goes through some of those procedures. Again, that's not something we're doing as a cost savings. We have talked with the infectious disease specialist down in Fargo, and it's a similar procedure you'll see at hospitals for folks that aren't necessarily going into isolated areas. So again, they're doing the same type of procedure on reusing that type of mask. And so that's our goal, because if as students and instructors and staff, if we go through those every day, 300, 400 flights a day, we're going to run out of masks in a week. And that's part of our mitigation. So that takes everybody's responsibility. I did see a question on, which is an awesome question. That screening form talks about sore throat, runny nose. What if I have allergies? I'm going to get a runny nose this summer. That we work with student health. If it's a normal precondition, that is okay for you to answer no. If it's something different, if it feels different than what you typically get from allergies, then you should honestly fill out that screening form. And so again, a lot of these processes and procedures, just like everything else that we do, there is some personal and professional integrity that goes along with it. Hopefully,
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
The next question is for Jeremy. Is flight training and our flight lessons restricted to airports only in North Dakota, meaning no cross-country flights to Minnesota or local flights in the Crookston area?
Muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry.
Here we are.
Oh, that's such a rookie mistake. we are going to allow flights into Minnesota and South Dakota. So the big change is that we're not allowing fuel stops or food stops, but most of the cross countries can be done without needing a fuel stop. We are writing pre-canned or pre-programmed cross-country routes. So we are not allowing people just to choose whatever route they want. The flight instructors and students will have to pick one of those routes. That's actually how I went through training. It's not a new procedure. It's just we're bringing back something that existed many, many years ago. But no fuel stops unless it's needed for an emergency. No food or I am safe stops unless it's needed for an emergency or I am safe reasons. But yes, we're flying into Minnesota and South Dakota, but you're not stopping.
Thanks, Jeremy. Brian, our next question deals with what happens if someone does test positive for COVID-19. Can you elaborate on the process that is in place?
So our process mimics the university's process. The first thing is obviously our number one priority is that person, and making sure that they've gone through the process with Altru, student health, and so on and so forth. And then our policy also goes through assisting with the contact trace team. So what that is our university student health has developed, or they've all been trained on contact tracing. So if, let's say, a flight student ended up testing positive, what we would do is we'd go back 48 hours and see who that person flew with. This is part of what Jeremy mentioned, why it's important that we're not doing coverage flights, we're not allowing observations, because if it's a student, then that student was probably most likely only, we'll say, breaking the CDC 6-foot guidelines with their CFI, passing in the dispatch area, walking into the center hangar. The CDC in the North Dakota Department of Health says that close contact is somebody that has been within the 6-foot area is what we're using for 15 minutes. And so again, that CFI then would have been a close contact, and then we would ask them to remain clear of flight operations. So anybody that meets that criteria, that's how the process works. And we've done some of this down in Phoenix, just as an example. We had a student that was undergoing testing, and the whole apartment got shut down, basically. They got put on flight hold, and they understood why. It was a 4 or 5 day until the test came back. I know the tests are getting better, but after the test cleared up and said, nope, negative for COVID, the apartment was back online. But I guess that's kind of that process that we will go through, but we are not doing the contact tracing at the airport. We are working with UND Student Health, Altru, and the North Dakota Department of Health if that were to occur. So
Great, thanks, Brian. Professor Archer, this next question is for you. Any news from the FAA on an extension to the 1 year to finish rule for ground school courses?
I actually might let Jeremy take that one for me.
Sure, real quick. We know that's on a lot of people's radar, and we will be addressing that with the FAA shortly. The reason why we haven't addressed it yet was that we simply wanted a date when we could return to flight training, because that determines how far we're going to request the extension and that kind of thing. So I don't expect, I can't promise any pushback from the FAA, but we will be addressing that shortly.
So I do have a question for Mr. Archer. For fall registrations, when might they expect to be able to register in Campus Connection?
They should expect that early next week, within the I'd say the first few days of next week. We do have some reduced staffing there, so it might be a little bit delayed, but we're trying to get that out next week.
Thank you, Louis. The next question will be for Jeremy. Why is the university prioritizing new flight students when most spring and still some fall flight students didn't finish and are running into deadlines that could force them to retake writtens or retake ground school?
Again, I understand the frustration and everything, but when we put that into account, we can't have all 1,400 students here next week. We just can't do that. It goes back to what Brian was talking about with contact tracing, and we just have to have a limited number of students here at the same time. And so the plan of having summer students here first, it allows us with a learning opportunity to move forward. But our goal is to get as many students through this summer as possible. So a student that's finishing up, should only need to be here for, say, 3 weeks. That's it. Because we're not going to be doing 2-day-a-week training. The goal is 6-day-a-week training, and get students done and get them out is the goal this summer.
Thanks, Jeremy. So Megan, I have a question for you. Is University Place apartment style? And could you elaborate on the amenities there?
Sure. University Place is apartment style. There are full kitchens within those units. And so each unit has a full-size fridge, a stove and a dishwasher. And then there's also a shared living room area. And so those units, the majority of them have 2 bedrooms, which we'll be offering to students as private bedrooms. So you would be sharing your apartment potentially with another individual, but would have your own private bedroom that's connected to that shared kitchen and living room area. All amenities such as the internet, electricity, water are included in that summer housing rate. And then the building is air conditioned, just so you guys know.
Thank you, Megan. The next question is for Jeremy again. Sorry, Jeremy, keep coming back to you. I have stayed in Grand Forks for the entire period of time that school has been out, and I had started my 102 training last fall. What does this mean for the restart of my flight training?
That's useful information. We will be writing and getting a survey out to the students to collect that type of information, because that will play a role in the decision-making moving forward. So that's a great example of useful information that will influence our decision-making. So stand by for now, but that survey will be out shortly.
Brian, I have a question for you. Will there be an aviation shuttle bus this summer, and what might that look like?
There will be a shuttle. If you have other means, my recommendation is to have other means. Part of our mitigation or transportation, they're only allowing 4 students per shuttle bus coming out every 15 minutes. And so we are going to do what we can from a schedule standpoint to try to alleviate that pressure. But again, that's one of those mitigation strategies. And so again, if you have means to drive to the airport, that's going to be the recommended route, because again, we can't have 6, 7, 8 people in the shuttle. So
Thank you, Brian. Jeremy, here's another question. I only have 4 lessons left from 222 as a junior. I don't want to spend all of my summer in Grand Forks. Is it possible for me to come later in the summer to finish up those lessons, or am I required to return when told to?
No, that's a great scenario too. That I know we have a bunch of students that fit that model where they just have a few lessons and then a stage check. If a student doesn't want to do that until August, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. And then as we get more guidance out for fall semester registration, I think we're having relaxed prerequisite requirements for the fall semester too. So I would say a student that only has a few lessons left, they could technically wait till the fall if they want to do that also. But somebody that wants to wait till August, absolutely. That's a realistic opportunity.
Thanks, Jeremy. So Brian, are observation flights going to be allowed?
nope. That's just simple. You're putting another person in a cockpit, so or in the cabin area, and so no observations. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay, Professor Archer, let's try another one for you. Will fall flight course registration be adjusted like the summer flight courses were based on how far you are in flight training and not on the Ames waitlist?
So for the most part, no. Now with the caveat that obviously this continues to be a dynamic situation. So if things need to be adjusted, we'll take the appropriate steps. But at this time, if you have a status of added in Ames and you have 12 lessons completed in the prior course, you'll be able to register for that course in Campus Connection. For those that are on the wait list, we again will approach those when we're able to. We do have some capacity constraints, not only with our standard capacity constraints that we have with aircraft and flight instructors, but we also have capacity constraints with the classrooms this time to maintain social distancing. So we'll approach the wait list when we can, and we'll try to accommodate as many students as we can. But no, at this time, we don't intend to do any reshuffles or anything like that based on flight progress.
Thanks, Louis. Say, Brian, can you elaborate on the process of international students returning to fly?
Yeah, the international side, there's obviously some national requirements there where you just even come back to the U.S. right now, internationally may not be possible depending where you're coming from. And so right now, how we have the process, if you are international and you are given the opportunity to return to Grand Forks, the way the state of North Dakota differentiates that is that would actually require a true 14-day quarantine. The difference there is the quarantine if you're international, and then the state looks at if you're outside the state boundaries, it's a 14-day, I want to say not self-isolation, but you're avoiding others. So again, you're not necessarily locked down in your apartment for 14 days. But again, you shouldn't be going out doing social things and going to restaurants and all that kind of stuff. You want to try to avoid people as much as possible. So that's kind of the route from the international as we start flowing down that path.
Okay, Brian, we'll stay with you for another mask question. Will UND be providing the required masks for students, or are we expected to bring our own?
Well, I'll tell you, if you have your own masks, I'd recommend you can bring them. If you have access to surgical masks, or you saw some and you want to purchase them, by all means you can. We have, like I said, 2,500 here. I believe another 5,000 order has been placed. I think I also saw a question on there as to cloth masks, but so we do have those to keep us rolling, through the summer and provide that protection to you, the student. The reason for the cloth mask, again, that was gone through from a risk management standpoint, is that the cloth mask, you're not always guaranteed to have that 3-layer of protection, because kind of the mantra that we're using, or UND is using, is that I wear my mask to protect you, you're wearing your mask to protect me. And so not all cloth masks are the same. And that's the hard thing is how do we know that you don't just have a t-shirt that you sewed on, to your face. And so that's part of it, is that risk mitigation. And so it's the easiest to say surgical mask required in the cockpit, because then I know that everybody's wearing that same protection.
Thanks, Brian. I'm actually going to answer one question quickly. I was asked whether or not this session was going to be recorded. It is being recorded, and we'll be placing it on YouTube, and hopefully Professor Van Huysen will email it out to the student listserv here, hopefully by the end of today. So if you did come in late and you missed the beginning part, we will be sending that link out for you. But with that said, Jeremy, I do have a question for you, and Wes, you can chime in as well. How often can they expect to fly each week this summer?
I'll start off. The goal is 6 days a week, but like most of you know, MEI and then flight instructors that are qualified to teach 414, those are our most limiting factors. So those students, 325 and 414, might be limited to 3 days a week, but the goal is 6 days a week for all courses.
Thanks,
And
Jeremy.
just piggyback off of that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Wes.
Yeah, for helicopter students, it's roughly the same. So again, the biggest limiting factor for starting out anyway is going to be flight instructors. But for those priority students, especially, 6 days a week, the goal is to get you through your stage check ride. And then once we get back into June and we have more and more students coming in, then it's going to be up to you and your instructor. But at least that 5 days a week for a summer schedule should be possible with the amount of students we have.
Thank you, guys. Another question for Professor Archer. Why are summer classes even being offered in a time of such uncertainty? Wouldn't it make more sense to use the summer to just finish everyone up?
Couple of issues with that, and there's actually a variety of issues. But the one that's probably most relevant is if we were to not offer any summer training, that's really just going to push the demand into the fall semester, and we're going to have even more strained capacity than we've ever had in the fall semester to try to accommodate every student. So we have to keep making progress so that we can continue to accommodate as many as we can in the fall.
Thanks, Louis. Say, Jeremy, is the testing center open for written tests this summer?
Yes, the test center will be reopening. It's going to be a reduced number of exams that are available because it will only be one student per room. There's 2 testing stations per room, but that's being changed to 1 test station per room. So yes, reopening.
Thanks, Jeremy. Brian, here's a question for you. It's kind of a lengthy one, but it's a good one. How can you justify opening flight operations when in Grand Forks COVID-19 cases continue to rise every day?
No justifying the opening of it, and I think the key to that is what you come back to is going to be different, and what we're doing today that we did 2 months ago is completely different. If Jeremy and Dick and Paul and Wes approached me and said, hey, we're opening the doors on June 8th, every student's invited back, all 1,400 if they want, that would be a problem. And I couldn't justify that. And I don't think Paul Linseth, as the accountable executive, could justify that either. So we are taking that staged approach. And from a protection standpoint, really the only we'll say the most critical or highest probability of an issue is inside that cockpit. And so we are doing what we can to limit the transfer of COVID in that cockpit. Now, with that said, a lot of that falls on the student, the CFI, myself, on what we do outside. Like I mentioned earlier, it's what we do when we leave the airport. If you follow every procedure under the sun here at the airport, but then you're down at University Park hanging out, grilling out with 35 other people, you are increasing the risk for yourself. And then if you choose to come back to the flight line without adhering to social distancing recommendations, you are putting those around you at risk, and that's what people have to understand. So again, we're leaning on we're leaning on our safety culture, and we have a pretty darn good one. And so we're leaning on that, and we're leaning on our students and our CFIs and the leadership team to ensure that we're able to make it through this.
Thanks, Brian. We do have a number of questions wanting to clarify the Minnesota residency thing, or if they cross the bridge into East Grand Forks, what does that mean as far as their screening form?
Jeremy, you want that, or you want me?
Sure,
I'll run with that one.
I'll start, you chime in afterwards.
Sounds good.
That's got a lot of questions, and believe me, it applies to also employees. It's not just a student thing. I have 2 assistant chief flight instructors that live in Minnesota. This is we have to realize as a university, we have to honor what the state government has set. And in that, it is on the state site, the North Dakota Department of Health, with travel restrictions. It states that anyone that is traveling out of state should remain clear of people as much as possible for a 14-day period. Another thing that's very important to understand is that when it comes to the University of North Dakota, the only thing that's going on right now that has physical students on campus is flight operations. No other college, nothing else going on has a student here completing required education. So the spotlight is on us. And so therefore, we are requiring this procedure where they're not quarantined, they're not self-isolated, but you are to remain clear of other people as much as possible for 14 days. And then yes, you may resume flight training as long as you don't have symptoms. So it is coming right from the North Dakota Department of Health.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. The next question for Jeremy. My son and his roommate never left Grand Forks. They live in the Bowdoin. They both have unfinished flights from the spring. How do we let you know that?
That'll be that survey. So we'll be cataloging things. And then, this applies to all courses. There's nothing wrong with communicating with the assistant chief flight instructor that's responsible for your course. I think it would be very wise to do that because it communicates motivation and gets your name out there that you want to be back on the flight line. So communication with the assistant chief, look for that survey. I'm going to push to get it out next week, and we'll start putting more of those puzzle pieces together.
Thanks, Jeremy. Megan, another question for you. When students travel back from either out of state or internationally, are they able to stay at the university place for those 14 days?
Students are able to stay in University Place. We are again asking to follow those state kind of guidelines where they're not being around people. And then we're asking that students in housing really follow those physical distancing guidelines as well, and not have, you know, gatherings in their apartments, and try to keep that space from others as much as possible, but they are able to stay in campus housing.
Thank you, Megan. Jeremy, can we still attempt to finish 102 flight training right now at home? So their private pilot certificate at home, or are we required to finish now that UND is reopening at UND?
That's fine. Yeah. So the 102 students, the only Aviation 102 students have that option to finish up Part 61 right now. So if you want to keep doing that this summer, you have that invite. I strongly urge before a student elects to go that route to make sure that you have a realistic picture of what's ahead of you. Is there a flight instructor, aircraft? And actually the FAA examiner is the bigger hurdle in that challenge. So make sure that you have all the resources available to you before making that call.
And Jeremy, if I could just jump in on that too, the same applies for 143. However, same warning. Right now, nationally, the wait list for a check ride under Part 61 is about 2 to 3 months. So if you're looking to finish your flight training and return in the fall, for example, on the helicopter side, you really need to be prepared for that and do some research. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has some.
Thanks, Wes. So Jeremy, I have to put you on the spot again, but you did mention that you're developing a survey that's going to go out to students that are still trying to finish their flight training, but we're getting some questions asking about, will they be given a notice 14 days in advance of that start date so that they could return to start that distancing process?
Yeah, very good question. Very, very good question. That's the goal. I mean, that makes common sense. You know, other things in my mind is 4th of July weekend. You know, I don't think anyone's going to really want to be sitting in an apartment in Grand Forks on a 14-day. You know, those are some of the hurdles moving through. You know, I could also, I'm just brainstorming out loud right now, which is not a smart thing. But the survey, probably we might have some dates on there. You know, would you be available on this date? Would you be available on that date? And that would help us put those pieces together and seeing what student would be available on what date. So yeah, stand by for now. We'll collect that info.
Thanks, Jeremy. Brian, this question's for you. We live in Phoenix, Arizona. Can my student try to finish his flight lab at the Gateway facility?
That's more of a Jeremy, but I'll give you a shot. Unfortunately, the 141 transfer, it's not possible to complete there and then come back up and resume. And that's just how the 141 regs are laid out. So is that, I've seen Jeremy nod, so I must have done something right.
Brian, again, a couple more questions coming in about masks and the differences between masks, or cloth masks, surgical masks, N95 masks. Could you provide a little bit more guidance on the masking?
Yeah, you know, I think we're going to go through a lot of questions, you know, with that. But again, what I'm trying to stress is that in the airplane, that surgical mask is what is required. And again, with that, we ask that you trust the system and you trust the process and all the things that we've done. So again, that's gone through UND Safety Office, the Aviation Safety Office, then even infectious disease specialist down in Fargo. So we've pulled in so many different people on coming up with that requirement with the ultimate goal of the student employee safety as number one. So that's the biggest reason. Like I said, if you're in dispatch area and you want to wear a cloth mask, doing that portion, that's fine because you're not confined within an airplane with somebody else for 2 hours. But once you head out to that airplane and that you're sitting in that airplane with your CFI at that point, that surgical mask is required to be worn. So I'll jump on two other quick questions that I did see. Someone asked a UAS question on if I check in at Ryan Hall, will I be okay at the airport? The answer to that is yes. You will receive a colored dot for a day, and that gets you that you've been successful through screening. So again, if you check in Ryan, you're good all day at the airport and out at flight operations. So.
Thank you, Brian. Professor Archer, a question for you. I got dropped from my summer course due to priority. I was in added status. So I moved to enroll for the fall course, but I'm now on the wait list. Will fall flight courses be readjusted as they were in the summer?
So we partially addressed that. At this time, we don't have a plan to shuffle fall courses based on flight progress. But for those that are on a wait list for a fall course, we are going to evaluate the wait list and see what we can do to accommodate as many as possible. And some of those considerations might certainly come into play if you were pushed off from a summer course, and then we would certainly consider when we look at a priority for a wait list.
Thanks, Louis. And I think we have time for 2 more questions. But like I said before, we are recording these sessions and look for an updated FAQ to come out from Professor Van Huysen. But Jeremy and Wes, what does the stage checklist look like right now?
Well, there's a few questions with stage checks. I know I saw a few questions about what if they did the oral portion back in March or February, will they have to redo it? At this time, yes. I mean, that is one area the FAA has not relaxed. And when you talk about pilot certification, we have to do the oral and flight within a prescribed window. As far as the stage check list, it's empty right now. And so I'm not, that's one area that will be fairly light at first, in all honesty. Again, here I am brainstorming out loud, but when the summer students start, they got a lot of finish up training, and the stage checklist might get a little bit busy, but it also could be an opportunity for students that just have a little bit of flight training left. So my role this summer is just try to avoid the peaks and valleys of flight training, so the COVID mitigation is more manageable. So yeah, it's we don't have a long wait list, let's put it that way.
Okay, and this will be our final question, and we'll give it to Brian. Are there any concerns about clear communications over the radios while wearing masks in the cockpit?
Ooh, that's a good one, and hopefully kind of easy. But no, actually, the one concern that we have seen with the mask is, I know Wes, he had it in the helicopter the other day. I've gotten a few text messages from people around the industry that wear masks, but sometimes if you do have that mask and it is tight and you're wearing sunglasses or glasses, there is a potential to fog up. I know a couple corporate pilots, I think, texted me this morning and said dial soap helps to prevent some of that fogging. But again, those are things that as the PIC and the crew member, again, we're going to continue to live and learn through this process. And so I think Jeremy made the statement that if at any time the PIC makes that determination, that the mask is inhibiting their ability or it's a safety concern, they do have that ability to remove the mask in flight. The integrity side of that to our pilots is that we don't remove the mask because it's annoying or it's different and I don't want to wear it. I think as an organization, we can get used to it. And again, it can just be something different. And so that's kind of the challenge that we are all going to face as pilots here at UND Aerospace.
All right, well,
Great.
thank you, Brian. And I want to thank all of our panelists for coming on and answering a lot of questions today. And again, we have captured those that we didn't have a chance to answer. We also want to just state again, if you have individual situations, questions, please email the flight courses at aero.und.edu. A number of people monitor that email address, so they will be able to get back to you on those individual situations. And then also look for an email, hopefully later this afternoon, from Professor Van Huysen that will have a link to the YouTube recording of this seminar. But we can't stress enough, we are very excited to be able to resume flight training over the summer. And again, thank you for your patience. And Dean Linseth, would you like to say any final words?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Bierke. Just excited to have you back on the flight line. Looking forward to it. Thanks everybody for on the panel. Megan, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your support. Great day. Thank you. Have a good one.